We played strangers at the hotel bar. Then I saw who she'd been with. I make a living making other people look faithful to themselves. I'm a tailor, old school chalk on wool, thumb pricked from pins, iron that hisses like a cat. When clients step into my shop, they hand me bodies and stories and ask for a version of themselves they can step into without fear. A good suit is just a conversation in cloth. You leave room at the seams, a quiet allowance for life to breathe or tighten. My wife Nora loves that line. She's a brand director for hotels, the queen of launch parties where champagne behaves, where the lighting forgives and the playlists never outstay their welcome. When we met, I measured her for a women's tuxedo she wanted to look like a scandal and a solution. She laughed when I wrote her initials inside the lining with invisible ink. "In case I forget who I am," she said. We've been married long enough to own furniture that remembers other apartments, long enough to know where the other keeps spare painkillers and favorite mugs, long enough to grow lazy in ways that feel like comfort, until they don't. One Monday night, with a hurricane of emails still whirling on her phone, Nora stood in the doorway to my workroom and said very casually, "Let's meet as strangers on Friday. Hotel bar. I'll pick the place." The idea landed with the dangerous sparkle of a new pair of shoes. We'd been careful with each other, but careful can turn into careful distance. "Strangers," I said, pressing a seam flat. "We'll write the first 5 minutes of our story again," she said, walking toward me, hip against the pressing board. "No wedding talk, no groceries, just hello hello and why are your hands like that?" "My hands. They look like work," she said and kissed my palm. "I like it." Her work that week was the Magnolia, an old riverfront hotel with fresh money in its bones. The bar was a museum of mirrors and plants, all flattering green. Nora sent me the time and told me to arrive alone. "Bring cash," she added like an accomplice. On Friday, I shaved with the razor I use when I want the world to notice I tried. I pulled on a slate suit with a lapel narrow as a secret and a white shirt that smelled like clean courage. The Magnolia's doorman tipped his hat, and I tipped him back with a smile, the kind you use when you're trying out a new version of yourself. The bar smelled like citrus and polished wood. The seating was arranged for gossip. Strangers touched each other's elbows as if invited by the furniture. I chose a table against the mirror, ordered 2 club sodas with lime and a bourbon for courage, and rehearsed hello. That's when I saw Nora, only not with me. She came out of the elevator, alone at first, and paused at the edge of the room with a director's eye. Then a man stepped into her pause like a line delivered on cue. I recognized him from a dozen launch photos. Sebastian Hale, the investor with the permanent tan and the watch that looks like a promise to be somewhere better. He had a way of standing too close without technically touching you. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. He bowed his head toward her like the room was loud, and she tilted hers toward his like the room deserved it. He said something, lips barely moving, and Nora laughed, head thrown back, throat bare, the laugh that makes waiters forget they're carrying glass. When she finally saw me in the mirror, a shiver walked across her face. Surprise, calculation, then the smile she keeps for me alone. Sebastian followed her gaze. For a heartbeat, he and I were 2 men looking at each other through the person we wanted to be loyal to. He lifted 2 fingers from the bar in an elegant not-quite wave, and then slid into the crowd, leaving behind a very faint note of pepper and pine. Nora crossed the bar as if it were a stage and the scene were hers to save. "Has anyone told you that suit could start a rumor?" she said, stopping just shy enough that we were not touching. "Buy me a drink." "Depends on who you are," I said. "I don't buy drinks for strangers." She tilted her head, eyes trying on me. "I'm Nora," she said. "I work with problems before they know they are problems." "I'm Daniel," I said. "I solve problems after they've outgrown their trousers." Played. God, we played. The talk came easy because we already knew how to be each other's favorite audience. She let me see her like a man who had to earn each glance. I let her hear me like a woman who could sense truth without being offended by its edges. She sat, I stood. I stood. She moved closer. A low song leaned against the room and then leaned harder, and we drifted into its gravity. No choreography, just that small miracle when two people decide to move in the same rhythm without being asked. I didn't forget Sebastian, but jealousy is a noisy drunk. I let it sit at the table and keep quiet while the rest of me lived. When I drew Nora onto the floor, her hand found my shoulder like home disguised as discovery. Her hair smelled like something new, orange blossom, a note of spice. Hotels sometimes pump, a signature sent through vents like a promise. It clung to her the way jobs do. We danced with the ease of people who have survived kitchens and taxes together. We danced like we were brave for a night. The bartender topped off our water without asking, the lights dimmed by one unnoticeable notch. Somewhere in the room, laughter sharpened into flirtation and softened back into friendship. Nora laughed into my throat, low and private. "I like this version of you," she said. "Which?" I asked. "The one that forgets he's safe," she said. "Come upstairs." It would pass any screener. Two married people stepping into an elevator, bodies not specifically described, a mirror holding them like a polite witness. Our arms brushed. My hand found the small of her back like it had a memory. The elevator sighed open on 12. The hallway was quiet with money. We walked without talking and spoke without words. The click of her heels slowing when I slowed, her shoulder grazing mine to say keep going. Inside the room, she didn't turn on the ceiling lights. She found a lamp and turned it low, and suddenly the world had manners. She took the pin from her hair and it fell like a cue. We were still two strangers working out a scene we'd written together at our own kitchen table. We touched the way you touch when you want to be remembered as careful. I traced the seams of her dress without unzipping anything. She mapped the shape of my shirt buttons without capturing a single one. She kissed my jaw with a patience that warmed more than it scorched. Nothing to blur, nothing to explain, enough to leave a high, humming line under my skin that did not fade when we stepped back and looked at each other like we'd found the last empty booth in the city. When we finally turned toward home, she packed her hair back into its knot and pressed her lips to my collarbone in a kiss that felt like a handwritten apology delivered before anything went wrong. Back in our apartment, she showered. I hung my jacket on the chair and saw it, a faint coral smear on the inside of the lapel. Lipstick. Not mine, except it was hers. A color she only wears when she's pitching something difficult. Jealousy woke up and tried to pick a fight. I let it talk. I didn't let it decide. When she came out in a t-shirt I used to wear to sleep before it became hers, she found me staring at the lapel like it had committed a crime. "You want to ask?" she said. "I want to know," I said. "I can sew a straight line, but I can't stitch around something if I don't know its shape." She sat on the arm of the sofa, knees a V, shoulder warm against mine. "Sebastian thinks every opening night is a love story with him in the last act," she said. "He came to the bar to congratulate me on the magnolia and to test whether my ring was a decoration. I invited him to sit. I laughed at a joke because it was funny, not because he was. Then I saw you, and every version of the night that's a mistake got cut from the program." "That's the truth?" I asked. "It's the one I'm trusting," she said. "If you need me to send him a sentence that closes a door, I will, but I didn't open one. Not tonight." I thought of her laughing at the bar, head back, throat a kissable line. I thought of the room upstairs and how we'd written each moment without taking our clothes off, and how that had turned heat into attention instead of excuse. I don't want a sentence, I said. I want a rule. Name it, she said. No secrets with sponsors, I said. If you're in a room with a man who speaks in percentages, I want to know the room exists before you're in it. She nodded, and for you. If I start wanting to be admired by anyone who isn't you, I'll tell you before I start rehearsing my reasons. We slept like people who decided to keep what they bought together. In the morning, she made coffee strong enough to fix a bridge. I went to the shop and tried to work, but I hemmed the same pair of trousers 3 times because I kept measuring my own thoughts. I was unpicking the last try when the bell chimed. The woman who stepped in wore a linen dress that made hot days look deliberate. She looked around the shop like it was a story she'd heard as a child. "Do you do rescue work?" she asked. "For suits," I said. "For nights that didn't go as planned," she said and smiled, forgiving herself. "I'm Paula. I used to date Sebastian. I know the smell of that hotel and the way it clings." She placed a jacket on the counter. A beautiful garment, ruined, wind down the front, a tear along the pocket. "I spilled," she said, "on purpose. I wanted to stop something from happening between a friend and a liar. It didn't work. She wanted to believe the best about him, like we all do when the lighting is kind. I should have asked how she knew me. I should have told her I wasn't a priest. Instead, I listened. Tailors listen. We hear your pockets rustle. "I saw you last night," Paula said, softening the confession. "I was at the bar when Nora walked in. She's luminous. He's a moth with a better suit. I don't know your marriage, I just know patterns. Sebastian doesn't go for homewrecking. He goes for homes that haven't checked their foundations in a while." She tapped the jacket, a finger on the tear. "You can reinforce this from the inside. No one will see the stitches, but you'll know they're there." "What would you do if you were me?" I asked. "I'd show up," she said. "Not to catch them, to be unmissable." She smiled once and let it fade, and I'd ask her to turn the lights on. That night the Magnolia hosted a donor's encore. Money always likes a second beau. Nora left early. I followed late, like an echo that decided to speak for itself. I wore a different suit but the same resolve. When I walked in, Sebastian was on the balcony talking the skyline into submission. Nora was by the bar organizing a list with her eyes. When she saw me, her whole face said you, like the word had needed a stage. "Is this part 2 of our game?" she asked, stepping into a space that felt like ours even with 100 people in it. "No game," I said. "Just me turning up the house lights." She threaded her fingers through mine. It wasn't a performance. It was a signal to herself. We worked the room together. For the first time in a while, I watched her work without feeling like I was losing something while she did it. She introduced me to donors as the man who made her tux. They liked that. Sebastian approached with a smile tuned to the exact wattage polite requires. "Congratulations," I said because it cost nothing. "Thank you," he said. "You too make a—" He searched for the word and found it begrudgingly, "fit." Nora's hand tightened in mine by a degree only I would notice. She didn't flinch when Sebastian's gaze tried to turn into gravity. She didn't apologize for being at my side. He read the room and moved on. Some men only enjoy exits. At midnight the band packed cables, and the plants resumed being plants. Nora and I walked the long way home, through streets that smelled like rain that never got scheduled. She stopped under a street lamp and looked at me the way she does when she's about to edit her day. "I wanted his attention," she said. "Not him. That's the part that scares me." She held my collar the way she holds fragile things for clients, firm, careful. The other part that scares me is how easily your hand on my back makes everything else seem boring. Boring is a compliment, I said. Boring means the fire knows where the stove is. She laughed, then grew serious. Come to the shop tomorrow, she said. Measure me. Make something for me to wear that only you would think to make. In the morning she arrived with coffee and a look that could quiet an argument. I hung a bolt of dove-gray wool, softer than it had any right to be, and chalked lines only I could read. She stood on the low platform in her slip while I worked, the kind of undressing that would pass any decency test and fail none of the senses. My hands on her waist were professional until they were. I circled her like a patient orbit. She watched me in the mirror and smiled a little every time I forgot to pretend we were just fabric and math. Arms, I said softly, and she lifted them, surrender wrapped in instruction. I slid the tape measure around her and let it rest just long enough to be a conversation. We didn't need to hurry. We needed to choose. When I marked the back seam, I left extra allowance. She noticed. Planning for changes, she asked. Planning for life, I said. I finished basting a jacket without a closure, just a shawl lapel that crossed without being forced. She slid it on and stared at herself, the way you look at someone on a street you thought you'd never walk again. She turned. The jacket moved with her like it had learned her before it met her. You did this with your eyes open, she said. That's the only way I know, I said. We locked the door. We didn't need a hotel. We needed the place that smelled like steam and cedar in us. We kissed with gratitude instead of theft. I let the jacket slip from her shoulders. She let my tie loosen without marring the knot. The mirror watched but didn't intrude. We stayed on the right side of every line anyone could draw and crossed the only one that mattered, the one that runs between pretending and choosing. After I stitched the jacket's inner pocket and slipped a note into it, for Nora, remember who you are. She felt the paper and didn't read it right away. It was enough to know it was there. We still go to hotel bars. Sometimes we play the stranger game just to remind ourselves how to show up with intention. Sometimes we sit at opposite ends and send each other drinks with dumb notes. Is that your real hair? Do you always smile at men in suits? Every now and then, Sebastian will be at a party in a corner of a room, orbit degrading for lack of anything solid to circle. I nod. He nods back. That's all. At home, the jacket hangs on the back of Nora's chair. When she puts it on, she moves like a woman who knows her lighting even when the lamps are bad. I keep the coral smear on my lapel as a reminder, not of threat but of truth. Desire isn't proof that love is failing. It's proof that love needs tending. Like a good suit, it asks you to check your fit. And on the nights when either of us drifts, we do the simple, scandalous thing Paula suggested. We turn on the lights. We stand there, two ordinary bodies, two mouths that still get it wrong, two hands that know where the other's back lives, and we tell the whole story out loud. Then I pick up my chalk. She straightens her shoulders. We leave room at the seams, and we choose to wear what we made.